Alright, here we go, a 5 horsepower Tecumseh engine on a wheeled weed whacker. Let's get after it. First thing you want to do is remove the muffler with the 7/16. Alright, so it looks like the only way to get this particular carburetor off is either to remove the gas tank and the engine shroud and then take this top plate off. You can do that, or I think we can just take the manifold, intake manifold off here at the head with 2 bolts, and then everything should come loose. Let's give it a shot. So I got the longest screwdriver I could find because that's what I can get the most leverage with and not strip out these bolts. Alright, let's try to remove these bolts. Alright, that one broke loose pretty easy. Lucked out there. Let's see about this other one. Usually if one's easy, the other one's easy. Yep. Go. Gasket's still in place. So this is where your air filter is supposed to be. This one doesn't have one. It's basically just a cage and it twists off. After you take off the air filter, you can remove this bracket with a 1/4 inch socket. Two bolts. And there's a little rubber square O-ring there for the seal between the two. Take this plate off, which is what was holding us up. Alright, now be careful, there are some linkages here. Take note where everything's at. Hopefully everything will stay together. Alright, now we just have to disengage the linkage from the carburetor down in here, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we want to take off the fuel line. There's usually just a pinch clamp. I like to use these pliers for that. And sometimes you really have to twist back and forth to break that fuel line loose. There you go. And now the carburetor you should just be able to rotate off. Alright, we have the fuel line off and it's disconnected from the engine. We should just be able to rotate the carburetor, and there you go. Comes right out. And I always make a little mark where it came out so I remember where to put the linkage back in. There we are, free. It's time to go ahead and disassemble this thing. It's a 1/2 inch float bowl nut bolt to take off. You also need to take this little cap off here with a pick and unscrew the, well, I'll show you. We're going to completely rebuild this carburetor. Let's start by taking off the float bowl and seeing what it looks like on the inside. Well, that varnish is a bad sign for sure. And I can tell how this float bowl is installed, that someone's been tampering with this. This indentation goes to the back. Phew, I can already smell the bad gas. Man, this thing's a stinker. It's stuck in place. I'm going to use this screwdriver to carefully pry off the bowl. There we go. Let's see what we have here. Pew! Nasty. Alright, so let's go ahead and take off the float bowl O-ring. We're not going to reuse that. And then we take out the float hinge pin, a pair of pliers. That's the easiest way to do it. Now we can remove the float and the float valve. There you go, see the float valve? We also have a seat down inside the carburetor. I don't know if you can see that. It's a little white rubber seat that needs to be picked out and replaced. Very important. We also need to clean up all this rust and any corrosion on the inside of the carburetor and on the float and the float bowl, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and take out the needle seat. I use this pick right here. You got to be careful not to scratch the inside of the bore, but just poke out the little plastic donut or rubber donut that's down in there. Looks like it's starting to come loose here. And there it is. You want to make sure to always replace that when you rebuild a carburetor. And it installs groove side down. There's a groove in it. So we also have to remove the nozzle, which is inside the carburetor. It comes out through the main hole here, and I get it out by pushing it down from inside. You can see it's right in the center of the carburetor, that little white brown plastic thing. So I'll stick a screwdriver in there and push down and hope that it wants to go. Sometimes you have to coax it different ways. I'm going to start spraying some carburetor cleaner down in there to try and break that plastic nozzle loose, because you can't pry it too hard because it's plastic. So I'll let that sit a little while. And also I have a pick that I can stick down in here and begin to wiggle it around, but be careful because it is plastic. Eventually you can work it loose. So there is 2 O-rings down inside this hole on this nozzle that I'm trying to remove, and those definitely need to be replaced when you rebuild a Tecumseh carburetor. Alright, I think I finally got that little nozzle worked loose. I can stick my screwdriver in there and pokes down through. Alright, let's see if we can pull it out. Once again, be very careful because it is plastic, so you get it picked down in there and just keep working it loose. You can see it wanting to come out. Alright, and that's what's left of one of the O-rings, and the other O-ring usually gets stuck down inside, but yeah, that's what's left of the other O-ring. And you can see this is the little nozzle. It's very important that you put the tiny little O-rings back on and set it in place. You'll have to get down in here with the pick and Q-tips and whatever little wire brush cleaners you have to pick out all of that leftover O-ring down in there and make sure this carburetor is as spotless as possible on the inside. You're gonna have to take off all this crud. Get some sandpaper and remove that layer of crud as well. And then we'll soak this carburetor. Alright, so we pick out this little plastic cover for the pilot jet. Poke a hole in it, doesn't matter. And then it pops right out. And we can go ahead and unscrew your slow jet. See it in there? You always have to be careful when you reinstall this type of stuff that you don't over tighten it. There we go. We're going to go ahead and soak this whole carburetor. The float bowl bolt is really dirty too, so we're going to have to soak and clean that. So to remove the primer bulb, there's a round clip that holds it in place, and you got to use a pick to get down in there and pry the little tabs loose. There's no real easy way to do it. You'll want to keep working this clip loose, and eventually it'll pop right out of there. There we go. And now we can remove the clip and the primer bulb. Ugh, that's what it looks like in there. It's not too dirty, it's a good sign, but we will replace this bulb. Everything has been disassembled, so we are ready to soak this carburetor. Make sure to wiggle it around to get all the air bubbles out. We also have this that's going in there, the main jet, pilot jet, float hinge pin, and float bowl. See you in a day. Guess what I forgot? The float. It's been 2 days, so let's see what we have here. Yeah, that looks a lot better. I'll get a toothbrush and some other wire brushes and finish it up, but I think we're good. The float looks much cleaner. And so does the main jet and the rest of the components. Perfect. I think we'll be able to put this carburetor back together today. Well, that looks like new. That's how you want it. Float looks pretty clean too after brushing it up. So I finally got the pick down in there and got this nasty little O-ring out of here. Luckily it looks like most of it came out, so hopefully there's not a lot down in there to clean. Another one of my favorite tools, compressed air. Really get in all the little cracks and crevices with this. You want to clean out everything as best you can. I usually stick a Q-tip down into the hole where we reinstall the seat. And you really want to check down in that hole because the remnants of those O-rings usually stays down in there. You have to pick them out with a pick or long screwdriver or something like that, and then continue to use carburetor cleaner and stick this Q-tip way down in there and work all that residue from those O-rings out of there. So one more time with the Q-tips just to make sure we are spotless down in these little holes. Looks like we're still getting a little bit of stuff out of there, so it's a good idea to keep cleaning. So I believe now this carburetor is clean enough for my liking. No more sediment left inside of there. There's still a little bit of discoloration, but that's okay. You do want to try to get it as clean as possible. But now I know down in these holes is spotless, so we can reinstall the needle valve seat and then those little nozzle O-rings that go down in there. The nozzle is clean, so it's ready for the O-rings. There's one. There's two. I will usually spray WD-40, just a small amount down in both of these holes, just to make it a little easier for those O-rings to slide into place. Okay, so it goes this side first. Right down in the hole. And I'm going to use this punch just to make sure it seats in place. There we go. So when you're rebuilding a Tecumseh carburetor, these are typically the parts you will replace: the float bowl O-ring, the float valve, the float valve seat, the two nozzle O-rings, and the primer bulb. And here's the new Tecumseh carburetor kit I'll be using. Now when putting this needle valve seat in, you want to really make sure that you put it groove side down. I don't know if you can see that, but on this underside here there's actually little grooves, and that's the side you want to push down into the carburetor. And this is a good way to do it. You just stick it in there so it's nice and straight the way it's supposed to be, and then we can push it down farther with a punch until it seats. So now we can push this needle seat into place with a punch, and you don't push it down too hard, but hard enough to make sure that the whole thing is seated in the bottom. And I think we're ready for the float valve and float hinge pin. Float valve goes into place, and we mount the hinge pin in there to keep it all together. Now here's an important step. You want to level the float. So in order to do that, you want to make sure the float is level all the way around, and as you can see, the gap on that side of the float is much greater than on this side of the float. So we need to bend that little tab on the bottom of the float. So when this is sitting down, it sits right about there. There's a little tab in there that we'll need to bend right above the needle valve. You just basically bend it down, which I've already done. So now when the float closes, it's pretty much level all the way around, which is what we want. Before I reinstall the slow jet and the main jet, I want to make sure they're nice and clean, and most importantly that the holes are clear. And I just use a little piece of wire here and separate the individual strands and poke it down through, and we're clear there. And do the same thing with the main jet. Make sure the hole is nice and clear, and you can also use some of these wires just to rub down in there and clear out some of the sediment and accumulation if you need to. You can tell if the jets are clear, just spray a little fluid down in there. Yep, and it looks like we're clear, I believe, on this one as well. I want to make sure just to clean it out one last time. Alright, let's put the float bolt O-ring on there. Float bowl, and this is important. The float bowl goes on a certain way. See the hinge pin? That's where you want that line to be, so we would install it like this. And the float bowl bolts, aka main jet. And not real tight, remember, because this is a brass bolt going into an aluminum body, so just enough to snug things down. And the slow jet, once again we have a brass component going into an aluminum body, so we don't want to tighten it too much, just very, very lightly snug. Remember this little cap, that's when we put that back on. Okay, time for the primer bulb. So here's the primer bulb. It comes with a new clip. According to the Tecumseh manual, this is the tool you use to install it. It's a 3/4 inch deep well socket, and you just push the rubber bulb all the way down. Put this on here, and I'm going to put it on the wood so I can get a little more leverage when I push down on it, but basically you just push that into place. You really have to get on a good flat surface where you can get some leverage, and I really don't have that right here because I'm filming, but let's see if I can push it into place. Yep, there it goes. So you'll want to make sure that that clip got pushed down as far as it can go, pretty much evenly all the way around. And, you know, give it a good tug, make sure everything's secure. So let's do this. When I took this bracket off, I was able to keep all the little springs and everything in place because I was careful. So I basically just need to get this linkage reinstalled. There we go, the linkage is in place. Going to mount this plate back in place. I'll clean out the fuel line a little bit or replace it. I don't have any fuel line right now, so I'll just clean this out and I'll reinstall that on the carburetor. Put the clamp in place. So we'll get these throttle plate bolts mounted up here. Let's go ahead and, now that this plate is on securely, let's remount the intake manifold to the engine. The gasket, I'm not going to worry about it, it's still in pretty good shape. If it gives me any troubles, it's easy enough to replace. Let's reinstall the muffler. These little bolts are pretty specific, little shoulder bolts. You do want to be very careful when tightening them up. They break off right here really easily. Don't ask me how I know, but just be careful when tightening them up. They don't need to be gorilla strength tight. Now remember, not too tight. You will hate yourself if you break off one of these bolts. And we can put the air cleaner mounting plate back on. You want to make sure that this little square O-ring is still in place and it goes against the carburetor. And these are the little bolts and the 1/4-inch socket I'll use to reinstall it. A long extension with a 1/4-inch socket's the best way to put this thing back on. Okay, we'll tighten these down and we'll be able to reinstall the air filter. Okay, this is how you install the air filter. And you put it on at an angle like this, and basically you just twist it down into place. One, two, three, four, five.